Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. We are in June. We're coming into July here shortly. I mean, in a blink of an eye, right? July, August, September. That's the final quarter of the fiscal year, or the third quarter of the calendar year. Why is that important? Because that is when the CPI data will actually be used to calculate COLA, the cost of living increase, or adjustment, right? COLA, cost of living adjustment. Effectively a pay raise and increase to benefits, whether it's your Social Security or veterans benefits like compensation and pension, dependency, indemnity compensation, and so forth. Now, this is interesting here because the trend, the trajectory has been upward since January with regard to inflation numbers and the projections as far as COLA is concerned. Now, let me throw out there to you as well, VA is bound to follow whatever Social Security implements for COLA, the cost of living adjustment, that pay increase, right? Now, that is for your compensation, dependency, indemnity, compensation, pension, those numbers. The funny thing here is that the VA does not utilize that same COLA calculation number, and they're not bound by law for other programs like Chapter 35 or, and this is for the, we'll call it a stipend, the educational stipend that you get with Chapter 35 for your spouse and dependents. And they also do not use the same COLA adjustment for VRE, Vocational Rehabilitation, formerly, which is now Veterans Readiness and Employment, VRE. So that's just a little interesting side note. I did find an article here, and I wanted to read it to you regarding COLA, and the headline is, COLA Increase 2025 Projection. How big is the next COLA increase, and how much could it change, right? My question to you is, knowing that it's moved up, the projection from January to essentially now, June, what do you anticipate COLA to be when they do announce it in October, when they receive the numbers? So let's jump into it here, and hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I truly appreciate it. All right, so jumping into it, there is a subheadline. COLA stands for cost of living adjustment and was set at 3.2% for 2024. So remember, 2024's COLA went into effect effectively for our pay received in January, and that had that 3.2% adjustment. Now, jumping into the article here, this is on Marca, marca.com, and let's go. Cost of living COLA, or cost of living adjustment, is a mechanism used to ensure that certain payments such as Social Security benefits or military pensions, including compensation, keep pace with inflation and changes in the cost of living. The adjustment helps individuals and families cope with inflation and rising prices for goods and services, and so COLA is commonly used in contexts such as Social Security benefits, military pensions, and some employment contracts. Now, they keep saying military pensions. So there's pension and compensation and pension. You'll even go to compensation and pension exams, C&P exams. Those are the two main monetary benefits that are paid out. So I don't know why they're just saying pension. I mean, it's not truly their wheelhouse, I guess. All right, moving on. For 2024, it was set at 3.2%, but the early door projections suggest that whilst it will decline to 2.7%. That's still above what was expected after the Senior Citizens League forecast the COLA to be set at 1.4 in January. Again, they're going to give a couple months here. So in January, the Senior Citizens League, who always does these projections, projected a 1.4% based on CPI, right? And then in February, they projected a 1.75, and then really last month in May, they were projecting in the 3s. So they're guessing now that COLA might drop down. I don't think so. I don't have the faith in our current fiscal situation. I think that inflation will still still be roaring. My guess, just to throw it out there, is mid threes. We'll see. I mean, maybe inflation will back off and they'll drop it down and it'll be, lower than that. But my guess is mid threes. We'll see what happens. So, meaning that things seem to be getting more expensive again. That's with the inflationary aspects. So, what will it impact? Okay, once the COLA percent is established, it is applied to the benefits or payments that are being adjusted. For example, if Social Security benefits are subject to a 3% COLA, beneficiaries would see the 3% increase in their payments. Again, this would be your VA compensation for most of us that we're looking at. This process ensures that the purchasing power or fixed payments remain consistent over time as it adjusts them to reflect the changing cost of living. It means that the economy is doing slightly better the fall of 2023, but that it still has some way to go to hit the president's target of 2% inflation ahead of the United States presidential election in 2024. Fortunately, things are a lot better than the highest ever COLA on record, which took place in 1980 and was set at 14.3%. Now, I'm going to tell you, it feels to me like we need a 14.3%, or even higher to really catch up here with what has been going on. Now, I'm going to insert also that the Senior Citizens League has also pointed out, and many others, that inflation costs, if this is the line of inflation costs, right? Inflation costs, we'll call it a 45, right? If inflation costs have been a 45-degree angle, the cost of living adjustments were sub that, which means that the gap is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger the further we go out. So we're really taking it in the shorts every single year with every single adjustment because they're never quite as high as they need to be. All right. Now, also, I'll throw out there that there has been on both the House and the Senate side different pieces of legislation that are calling for a change to how COLA is calculated. They talk about utilizing the CPIE indice to calculate COLA, which is the Consumer Price Index for elderly, because the majority of people receiving Social Security and so forth are retirees. So you have a different age demographic that is benefiting from the COLA. Now, it's hard to say how big of an impact that would be. Studies show that if the CPIE was utilized, that on average you would see maybe 0.25% of a difference, or 25 basis points upward on the annual adjustment. Now, doesn't sound huge, right? Instead of a 1.75, you would get a 2%, right? Now, that in 1 year isn't much, but if you go over time, you're going, increase on top of increase. It's kind of like compounding interest, right? So anyway, let's move on here. How COLA is calculated. The calculation primarily involves comparing the Consumer Price Index from one period to another over the annual fiscal quarters to ensure the government gets millions of data points to correctly make the adjustment, which are based on the third quarter. The process, again, the third quarter of the calendar year, the last quarter of the fiscal year, which is July, August, and September. The process typically starts with selecting a baseline period, which serves as a reference point for comparison. The baseline period often represents the average CPI over a specific duration. Next, the current CPI is calculated usually by determining the average CPI over the most recent period. This allows for an assessment of how the cost of living has changed over time. Based on the difference between the CPI of the current period and that of the baseline period, the COLA, cost of living adjustment, is determined. For instance, if the CPI has increased by 3% since the baseline period, then COLA would also be 3%. So with that, we'll go ahead and end it there. Remember that the months utilized, the quarter that's utilized to calculate COLA, cost of living adjustment, is July, August, September. The final numbers for CPI will be released, usually it's the second week-ish of October, and really right about that same time, the COLA is announced. and I will be sharing that with you as soon as it comes out and the projections along the way. So with that, I'd love to see your thoughts on what you think COLA will be come October, and we'll go from there. All right, thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys. Have a great one, and remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.